everybody, welcome back to another edition of Crafting and Crime Daily, the show where I recap live trials. But today I have a true crime story for you today that has a happy ending. Someone requested one. Hey, don't you have one with a happy ending? Yep, I do. I found one. So I take one day off and all kinds of stuff happens in the true crime world. Let's first talk about the Idaho student murders. We were looking forward to June when Brian Kohlberger would appear in court for a preliminary hearing. The court had set aside a whole week for this hearing where the prosecution would present what evidence they have against him, and the judge would determine if that evidence was sufficient to charge him with the murders of University of Idaho students and housemates Madison Mogan, who was 21, Kaylee Goncalves, who was 21, Xana Kernoodle, who was 20, and Kernoodle's boyfriend, 20-year-old Ethan Chapin. They were all fatally stabbed in this off-campus house that they lived in, the three of them. I don't think Ethan lived there, but he was visiting that night. So there was a secret grand jury. Now, you can charge somebody one of two ways, either through the preliminary hearing where the judge will rule that the evidence is sufficient to carry these charges, and then he would have had to enter a plea at that point. Or you can do this grand jury thing. So they had a secret grand jury. Not even the defense knew that this secret grand jury was going on. So they had the secret grand jury. The grand jury heard all the evidence and came back and said, there is sufficient evidence to indict him. They indicted him for all of these murders. So what that means is now he will appear in court on Monday, I believe. He's going to appear in court for his official arraignment, where he will enter his plea of guilty or not guilty. I'm assuming he's going to plead not guilty. And then they'll have to set a trial date. I don't know if they do it right then, but even if they did, I don't think it would be any time soon. Now, I'm sure that the prosecution, here's why the prosecution is probably very happy about this, because had there been a preliminary hearing, it would have been all over YouTube. I would have covered it live. Everybody out there would know what the evidence was, and it would make them very, very difficult for the prosecution to convene a jury. Yeah. This way, it's much simpler. Nobody knows all of the evidence that's out there. I mean, we know a lot of it, but there's a lot more that we do not know. And we're not going to know now until the trial. So they're still in the process of exchanging discovery. I think more recently, the prosecution turned over about 20,000 documents or 20,000 pieces of evidence to the defense. So it's going to take a good long time to prepare this thing for trial. They're going to have to get experts to review this case, the defenses. So I also heard yesterday the Lori Vallow Daybell, the gift that keeps on giving, Lori Vallow Daybell, she was indicted in Arizona. Was it Arizona? Arizona, for the attempted murder of Brian Boudreaux. Remember, I told you, he came home and the Jeep had pulled up, and that Jeep belonged to Tylee Ryan. And we believed that in the car was Alex, but I always thought, who was driving the car? Because he was in the back seat. He rolled the window down in the rear and stuck the gun out of the rear and shot Brian Boudreaux's driver's window out. Like, that's how close he came to being shot in the head. Luckily, they missed. Apparently, Alex was not that good with a gun. Anyway, but who was driving the car? Was it just him? Did he then make his way to the front seat and then drive away? Or was she driving? Or I don't know. I don't know what evidence they have specifically as to Lori Vallow Daybell, but she was indicted for that. Yeah, I'm telling you, just keeps going and going. So Nate Eaton with East Idaho News did an interview with one of the jurors who said that she was the face of evil. This juror was really, really remarkably well-spoken. I enjoyed listening to Nate walked him through the jury process. He had been a juror twice before, and he said he knew when he showed up immediately that this was not going to be the same as the prior 2 times he had been on the jury because there was so many people there. He later found out that he was one of like 1,500 people that had been called to jury duty that day. Then so he talked about the process. He found out the Friday before, he knew on the Thursday before trial began on Monday that he was one of 48. And then on that Friday before the trial was starting on Monday, he knew that he was one of the jurors. One of the interesting things I thought he said was like during the breaks when they would have these long periods of time where they were just waiting for court to go in session or something was going on in the courtroom, arguments or whatever, and they were sitting in the back doing nothing, he would apparently work on his computer. I guess they were allowed to have stuff in the back with them. I would have had yarn. I would have been crocheting, me, or I would have brought my diamond painting. Anybody want to diamond paint with me? Because I'm always getting people to diamond paint. So he would work on it because I think he has his own business. That's the gist I got, or that he works from home. In any case, he said that that when they went back to deliberate, they went through the easiest charges first. The easiest charge, he said, was, of course, the grand theft, the Social Security money that she was getting on behalf of Tylee and JJ. But they saved and this was Thursday night. They saved the conspiracy to commit murder of Tammy Daybell till the end, because there was a few people that just were not in agreement. They just weren't in agreement on that one. And then after they had dinner and they were all kind of exhausted, he said they knew that there was going to be a debate going into this last charge. They decided they would come back the following day. So they go home, they come back the following day, and he says what they did was they went around the room, and each person who had already decided guilty on that charge told these people that were holding out or that weren't convinced why they were convinced. Here's why I think she's guilty on this charge. And by the time they got around the room, I guess they had convinced these other jurors, yes, she's guilty on this charge. That's interesting, isn't it? So, and it was a long interview, but it was really, really interesting. Like, he was really, really paying attention. He said at times it got really confusing, the timeline, but the person that really did it for him was the agent at the end who presented a timeline and sort of tied it all together in with the text messages of Lori and Chad and all that stuff. So that's what really convinced him, I guess, or tied everything together for him to make it less confusing. All right, let's get to the true crime story today. So I'm sitting down to watch the news last night, and they had a story of a child who was abducted by her parent in 2017 and 6 years later was found. So we're going to talk about a missing child. Every year, many, many, many children go missing. Last year, 2022, 360,000 reports of missing children were filed with the FBI. Now, some of those could have been duplicates, but that's a lot of missing kids. And many of them are missing because their parents had a dispute after splitting up, and one parent takes the child, and the child is never seen again by the other parent. We're going to talk about the case of Ryan Asurka and Heather Unbahan. They're both weird last names. I'm so sorry. I apologize if I'm butchering the pronunciation of those names. These two dated for 5 years, which culminated in the birth of Kayla Unbahan on January 5th of 2008. Now, right after the birth of Kayla, Heather's like, I don't want to be with you no more. They split up. They go their separate ways. He is a new parent. He has no idea what his rights are as to visitation. He's thinking, okay, she's the mother of the child. What she says goes, and She really had no interest in me visiting her, but I tried. So Raya meets his current wife, then girlfriend. He meets her and he starts dating her. She's going through a divorce and she tells him, hey, so she's got a little bit more knowledge of custody because she's got a couple of little girls too. So she said, you really should be seeing her more than you're seeing her. So she says, why don't you work out something with Heather? So he works out with Heather that he can visit with Kayla twice a week, that she'll bring Kayla over and he can spend the day with her twice a week. So plans proceed for the wedding of Raya and his new girlfriend. Kayla is present at the wedding, but after the wedding, Heather's demeanor kind of changes. They were trying to work out at that point. He had said, listen, I would like longer visitation with Kayla. How about during the summer I take her and on holidays I take her? And this was what he was trying to work out. However, he was on the phone with Kayla one night and he finds out from Kayla that, hey, they've moved to Georgia. Didn't tell him. They just up and left South Elgin, Illinois, where he lived, where Heather and he both resided in Illinois. She's gone. He said the next day he went to court and filed for custody of Kayla and then proceeded for the next 5 years to fight for custody of his daughter. Heather would make these wild accusations in court and then fail to prove that the accusations were true. One of the things that she was saying is that Kayla suffered from allergies and that she had this rare autoimmune disease. So the judge was like, okay, I'm going to appoint a guardian ad litem. So the guardian tries to find doctors that will substantiate what Heather is telling the judge, and none of it. She couldn't get any doctor to substantiate what she was saying. But she did find out that Heather's was neglecting to get Kayla any dental care. Kayla had to have emergency surgery for removal of abscessed teeth and rotted teeth at a very, very young age. That's very unusual, actually. So the judge granted Raya, based on what the guardian ad litem was telling him, he granted Raya medical authority over Kayla. Well, Heather was not having this. She's like, no. It was clear she had no intention of honoring this order by the judge. So when she doesn't honor this order, they go back to court. The judge says, hey, Heather, you need to move back to Illinois. And he orders her to move back to Illinois. So she and Kayla move back to Illinois, where Raya is granted his twice weekly visitations with Kayla. But then what would happen is Heather would bring Kayla late to the visit and then pick her up 45 minutes early. So cutting into his visitation time with Kayla. So the other thing that Heather did was she had bought Kayla a cell phone. I don't think young kids should have cell phones. That's just my opinion. But she gives Kayla a cell phone to take with her to Dad's house. And then while Kayla's there, Heather's constantly texting her. So they go back to court and Raya says to the judge, listen, she's got this cell phone. Her mom's constantly texting her. Can you just tell her to leave the cell phone at home? So the judge is like, leave the cell phone at home. Well, so Heather buys Kayla this stuffed, what was it, a teddy bear? Oh, it's a bunny, a stuffed rabbit, a bunny with a hidden compartment in it. And she puts the cell phone in there. Well, Raya finds the cell phone and says, Kayla, can you unlock this? So Kayla unlocks it. He looks on it, and there were over 300 text messages that were disparaging against him. This is what she was telling her daughter constantly while she's visiting with her dad. So after he sees all of these messages, he goes back to court and he plays these messages for the judge, or he shows the messages to the judge. And the judge says, I'm going to grant you full custody. Now, they had no idea that this was even on the table, so it was a little bit of a surprise to Raya. But he was like, hey, okay. So here's what he has to say about the situation.
had some kind of psychological evaluation that Heather paid for and brought into court, and it had said that it's weird because it basically concluded that Kayla didn't have serious separation anxiety. The judge asked me, like, what do you think this says? And I said, I think it says she doesn't have a problem. It's like, that's what I think it says. So then all of a sudden, even though they came to court to say that I shouldn't see her, it was like, that actually helped me. So that was strange. Heather did a lot of strange things in court that helped me because she just couldn't see, like, from another point of view other than her own. Like, for instance, she went into court and just cavalier told them that Kayla's relationship with Heather's parents is more important than my relationship with Kayla. And the judge and everyone was just kind of like shocked. Like, I could see, like, even her own lawyer, everyone was just kind of like paused for a while because we couldn't really believe she said that. And it's not like that's like they see nothing wrong with it. So that's the kind of things she did where she just didn't seem to see the problem with what she was doing or saying.
So this was the same proceeding where the court, after seeing all of these text messages, says, I'm giving you full custody. So this proceeds, and Heather was actually granted visitation every other weekend. So the weekend of July 4th was actually on a Tuesday. So he tells Heather, listen, I'm going to let you keep her through the holiday, July 4th. I'll pick her up on Wednesday, July 5th. Now, Heather would have dinner every week, every Wednesday night with her parents. She was very close with her mother. They would talk every single day on the phone. Very, very close to her parents. So he would go and pick up. The plan for that week was on the 5th of July was for him to go pick up Kayla at Heather's parents' house. Kayla at this point was 9 years old. This is 2017. So he knocks on the door. The father answers. He's got this big grin on his face, and he tells Raya that Kayla and Heather went camping up in Wyoming. And then he shuts the door. They're not here. They went camping. Boom. So Raya calls the police. The police come. They interview the parents of Heather. And they tell the police, hey, we don't really know where she is, but I hope you never see her again. So as it so happens, on this Friday, 2 days later, they had a court proceeding where Heather was contesting his full custody. During this court proceeding, they're waiting for Heather to show up. He's thinking, okay, she'll show up this time with Kayla. She doesn't show up. And he waits and he waits, doesn't show up. So the judge says, I want this treated as a kidnapping. And it's my belief that Kayla is in danger, that she needs to be picked up. So Raya files a missing report in the county where Heather and Kayla live. And the prosecutor in that county refused to issue an Amber Alert. She said, no, the judge just flew off the handle. She just ignored his assessment that Kayla was in danger. She's like, no, they're just late coming back from their camping trip. So he goes to his county and he files a missing report for Heather and Kayla. And it is until July 27th, like 3 weeks after she's missing or supposed to be picked up by her father. 3 weeks later, they finally issue a warrant for Heather for kidnapping. Now, they knew what kind of vehicle Heather had. And as it turns out, the police learn a month later that Heather, 1 week after disappearing with Kayla, had sold her vehicle. That is the last known sighting of Heather until this week. So Netflix has this show called Unsolved Mysteries, and someone had watched that show, and the show is not even about this case. It talks about 2 cases where parents kidnapped their children. And one case was a father who kidnapped his child and went to Egypt. Or maybe it was his daughter. I don't know. He kidnapped his child, goes to Egypt where he's from. She never sees them again. And then the other case was a little boy, and his mother took him, and the father never sees him again. So similar situation. So at the end of this show, as the credits are scrolling, they're showing pictures of other missing children. Well, they show the missing children and next to their abductor, and they're time lapsed to what they would look like today. So they show the two that they covered the stories on, and then the third one that they show is Kayla Unbehan, and then a picture of Heather Unbehan, time lapse to what they would look like when this was filmed. Would be 15 years old now. So someone actually saw her, and that's like the only mention of Kayla on this show. Like they don't even talk about it. They're just showing her age progressed picture and saying, "Have you seen this child?" So someone in North Carolina sees this. They're in a shop. They see Kayla, and they recognize her from the show. So they notify one of the employees in this shop, and the employees call the police. And lo and behold, it is Kayla Unbehan. So Heather turns herself in. Kayla is reunited with her father, Raya, in Illinois. Heather is being held in North Carolina on a $250,000 bond. She will soon be extradited back to Illinois, where she is supposed to be in court on July 11th. So we'll learn more about this case on July 11th. But I thought you might want to, you probably heard about this missing child being found after 6 years on the news, and maybe you went looking for the episode that talked about her, and it didn't. It just showed a picture of her, which, I thought it was going to be like a whole episode on this missing child, but it wasn't. It just showed her picture. But that's how important these pictures are, that we get them out there, so you never know when someone's going to see it and go, "Hey, I recognize that person." So, scrolling at the end of the show, they saw this. It's amazing. So I'm so glad that they are reunited. Here's the problem, though. How much disparaging, or what did this mother tell Kayla? There's usually three things that parents that abduct their children will say to the child about the parent that they took them from. Either that he's very dangerous, and I'm doing this for your safety, or they'll say, he's really not interested in being with you, so we're just going to live without him. Or they're going to just say, he's dead. He died. So what did Heather tell Kayla, and how frightened she must be? Listen, I have a daughter. When she was 15 years old, like, her head would spin around like she was on The Exorcist. 15 years old is a very, very difficult time in the life of a teenage girl. She's uprooted from her home in North Carolina, where they said she looked well, seemed well cared for, and taken back to Illinois. I'm not saying that it shouldn't have happened. I'm just saying it's going to be a really tough road for that girl and for her father reuniting. It's going to take quite a bit of adjusting. So sad. All right, where's the crime calendar? Okay, let's shift. And all of the switching around that I've been doing over the last couple of days, we are going to talk about Crime Time, Fame, and Acclaim, Part 1 of Jack Unterberger. Jack Unterberger was born in Austria to a sex worker mother and a U.S. Army veteran father. Much of his youth was spent in and out of prison for crimes like theft, sex trafficking, and sexual assault. In December 1974, he was sentenced to life for strangling sex worker Margaret Schaefer with her own bra. While in prison, Unterberger began writing stories, poems, plays, a memoir, and his talent caught the attention of high-profile writers on the outside. In 1985, those advocates, including two who would go on to win the Nobel Prize in Literature, began petitioning for Unterberger's release. The petitions were denied due to a court-mandated minimum sentence, but Unterberger was released in 1990 after serving 15 years of his life sentence. Unterberger was released to acclaim. His memoir, Purgatory, or The Trip to Prison, Report of a Guilty Man, was taught in schools and later made into a documentary. He appeared on television discussing criminal rehabilitation and became a reporter for, oh my God, I will never be able to pronounce this next word, Österreichischer Rundfunk, a public television radio network in Austria. And I know I butchered that. Among the stories he covered, murder. Yep, we'll cover part 2 tomorrow. Yeah, oh my gosh. Okay, that's the show for today. I hope you guys enjoyed the content. Please don't forget to hit that like button. Yeah, I'll see you in the next episode.